So I just wanted to briefly introduce a few programs or initiatives that can be beneficial if you're interested in monitoring or improving the health of wetlands. I know personally I'm really interested in finding workshops, courses, webinars, information that can help me increase my own knowledge base, and I get the same feeling from a lot of you from just joining this workshop and through expressing that yesterday. So the programs that I want to introduce aim to measure the health of wetlands or shoreline ecosystems. And often the shoreline ecosystems can be inclusive of wetlands, such as marshes, swamps, or shallow open water areas where they're often transition zones between terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. So the first program that I think would be really useful for a lot of people here is the Foreshore Integrated Management Planning. So this is also called FIMP. It's a protocol that has been designed to map shoreline habitats, assess their values, and then establish proper guidelines for development along the shores. I know yesterday, I think it was Glenn had shared a link in the chat to SHIM, which is the Sensitive Habitat Inventory and Mapping. And this program was basically built off of that and has been grown and redeveloped over the last 15 years or so to become what it is now. So this program has been developed by the DFO, the Community Mapping Network of BC, and other collaborating partners. And it was revamped because a lot of people had concerns about shoreline impacts such as development and erosion, riparian fish and wildlife habitat, cumulative impacts. And so then Living Lakes Canada evolved it into a protocol that can inventory and map shoreline habitats, and then has the capacity to assess the values of the aquatic habitat in the area, which can then be used to reduce harmful developments. So this looks a little crazy at first, but I just wanted to show this to show how the program works. So it's broken down into 3 different steps, basically. And this is actually from a webinar that the program manager had recorded and posted online. So if you're interested in this program, I can send a link out with Alyssa's follow-up email that shows you that. So the program is broken down to 3 stages, as I said, and the first is the foreshore inventory and mapping. So that is the step where you're actually collecting raw data. So it includes desktop reviews using GIS software to find a suitable site and gather preliminary data that you might need, such as the ecosystem type and the size of the area. And then it also includes going out and completing the field surveys. So this is going out and going along the lake and counting variables along the shoreline, such as the number of docks. Like Neil said earlier on Lake Else, he counted over 100 docks just around the shoreline there. You can also count the number of recreational beaches, vegetation, cover percentages, verify the land use, and so on. And it also includes collaboration with First Nations to include knowledge if they're willing to share it with the project. And then in the second step is analysis. So you're taking the data that you've collected and it's being transformed into numbers that can pump out ranks of the different habitats along the shoreline. So this is kind of similar to the wetland health assessment, where it allows you to see like 0 is very poor and 5 is really great kind of idea, where you're seeing the rank of the habitat and land use around the shore in comparison to other areas, which can help provide sight into the health and sensitivity of each section to urban development that has been going on. And then the third step, the ranks that are provided in the index are used to make habitat sensitivity maps. So this is just mapping out around the whole shore and lake area, the different areas of interest and how sensitive each area is to the activities going on. And then development guidelines can be created from this and integrated into shoreline planning and guidance documents that could be used for official community plans. And these can aid in developing land use policies, regulations, and standards. And it's intended to increase long-term environmental planning capabilities. And each of these steps, if you're wanting to get involved with this, you don't have to go and do each step. Like it can be broken up and be done, like say one person could do the desktop review and then another could be out doing the field survey. So if you have a preference between what you prefer, there's ways to work around that. So by quantifying the levels of disturbance along the shorelines, the assessments can be completed to figure out the rate of change occurring along the shores. And this can be helpful information to know when creating the shoreline development guidelines, as it can give resource managers, planners, local governments, and communities an idea of what areas are being impacted the fastest and need to have better shoreline management. The program aims to collect this data in order to help conserve ecosystems, support climate resiliency, and protect species of concern. And it provides agencies with an easily accessible inventory of land use, shore type, existing riparian conditions, and human-made alterations throughout the study area. And then traditional ecological knowledge is included throughout all steps of the process, which I think is a really, really great addition to this. And even though the program's been designed for the foreshore of lakes, it shows how important mapping habitat in different ecosystems can be. And often, as I said, wetlands are found along the edges as transition zones. So I think it's a really great combination that can be super helpful. And this redevelopment was done very recently, I think they finalized it in March this year. So they are still calling the protocol a draft at the moment. But if you're interested in it, Living Lakes Canada, they are a very large organization that contribute to the protection of lakes, rivers, and wetlands. And they are currently doing a lot of this program specifically in the Columbia area, but I'm sure they're happy to take volunteers to help with much more. So the second program that I just wanted to go over is CABIN. So this is the Canadian Aquatic Biomonitoring Network. And aquatic biomonitoring, for those who aren't familiar with it, involves tracking changes in the composition of biological assemblages, so the species, the amount, the density, to support assessments of the condition of aquatic ecosystems over time and space. Specifically, this CABIN protocol studies macroinvertebrates in wetlands to assess the health of the ecosystems. And the aquatic macroinvertebrates are freshwater organisms that you can see with the bare eye and have backbones. And I think it was Christine that pointed it out yesterday when talking about the sharing the information after the wetland tours, that macroinvertebrates can be good indicators of ecosystem health. And this is because they're continually exposed to natural or anthropogenic disturbances and show predictable responses to this. So the absence or presence of them can aid you in understanding the current health of the ecosystem. And this protocol is actually based off of the original CABIN, which was derived or developed for rivers, streams, and the Great Lakes. So there's continuous lobbying from different environmental groups, and Environment Canada listened and created a protocol that would be specific for wetlands, because wetlands and river ecosystems are very different, and rivers and streams have the constant flow of water, which allows oxygen to move through the system. But with wetlands, you don't get that all the time necessarily. There's many environments that are anaerobic, and so they don't have that same oxygen quality. And the species assemblage that you might find there would be quite different than what you're finding in a river. So the information that's collected in this protocol includes primary site data such as site selection, ecoregion, classification of the wetland, which of course you're all now professionals in. And then the site description needs to be collected once on location, which includes coordinates, drawings, surrounding land use, the wetland characteristics such as plant communities, water quality parameters, sediment chemistry, and then of course the macroinvertebrate samples themselves. And the whole system is based off of a reference condition approach, meaning that Environment Canada has to go out and measure the range of biological conditions and habitat attributes at various reference sites. And then these are all organized into subsets or reference groups based on the biological communities. And once they have this, it creates a baseline that you can then collect the samples and data from different wetlands to compare to this baseline that they've created and find a relative rank or health of your wetland based off that same thing. So like the first program, this one is very new as well. It was developed last year, so they're actually still working on collecting the reference groups that can be used to compare test sites to. And they're hoping to have that done later this year so that those certified can start collecting information in the new year. This protocol is actually a certification program, and they provide the necessary training to develop the skills and knowledge to conduct these projects. And in order to gain access to the database that holds all the reference sites to find out your relative health of your wetland, you actually need to complete the training and certification, which is put on through the Canadian Rivers Institute. Unfortunately, due to COVID, they aren't holding their training this year, but they plan to continue in early spring of next year. The only thing is that this one is a paid certification program, but good news for some of you in here, there's a steep discount for students, NGOs, and First Nations who want to go through this. And then the results from this, as I've said, provide insight into restoration and enhancement opportunities, as well as the capability for long-term monitoring to assess the success of restoration and enhancement projects. And so I think it's something really interesting to keep an eye out over the next year as they finalize this working document and find all the reference sites that can create their baseline. And yeah, those are the programs along with the Green Shores that DJ provided us information on earlier. I think that they're really beneficial and interesting programs, and I have more resources for anyone who's interested in looking at these programs or getting involved with them, which I can pass along with Alyssa to send out later on.